Hello everybody. We got a serious topic today and it's about chickens again. The topic is one of my chicken management episodes and it's called Should I Vaccinate My Chickens? YouTube censors, I'm talking about chickens, not people. So take a chill pill and back off. Okay, in doing this subject, I'm going to have to read notes. I know the information, but a lot of the vaccination to do with certain diseases I was not as up on because, well, you'll know why when I get through this, okay? But in doing so, you're going to get a little bit of a crash course in chicken diseases. Before I say this, don't let this scare you, okay? If you haven't had chickens already, if you just got them, don't let it scare you. I've always said, you know, Gail Damero's book, The Chicken Health Handbook, is a great book, but before you get chickens, don't read that. You'll never get them. Just listen to Aunt Cynthia, okay? Just don't read that book at the beginning. Okay, before I get into this video, do not ask me to diagnose your chickens, please. It's impossible to be determinative over the internet. One, I can't handle your chicken. I can't observe your chicken. And two, I can't do testing. I'm not a veterinarian. I have the ear of several veterinarians who are chicken owners as well. Many vets don't know that much about chickens. They choose not to. They learned something in school about avian species, but they just choose to forget it for some reason. They don't treat chickens. And in addition to that, you know, even I can't diagnose your chickens, and sometimes you can't either, because a lot of times certain ailments or things can present like other things, such as leg injuries can have people screaming, "Oh my gosh, it's Merricks Disease." Okay, it's ridiculous to go there at the worst case scenario. So that said, most who vaccinate for this more obscure stuff are commercial operations, not backyard flocks. All right, let's get that out of the way first. And let's start with the least worrisome, coccidiosis. Coccidiosis is caused by a protozoan in the soil. It's kind of, I compare it to Giardia, like if you drink water out of a creek and then you get intestinal ailments. Coccidiosis ravages the intestines. Protozoans live in the soil. There's about 9 named types of protozoans, if I recall. I may be incorrect about that number, but there's a certain number of named protozoans that live in soil, and you may have the protozoans in your soil may be different than the protozoans in someone else's soil. So there are also other variants that have cropped up in recent years. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. I need to drink my water. Many chicks that are brooded in a brooder for a few weeks and then they're put on the ground, the oocysts in the soil overwhelm their little systems, and all of a sudden you've got a coccidiosis situation. Chicks raised by a broody hen are less likely to contract it, in my experience. I think, one, because they peck in mom's poop. I mean, gross as it sounds, they're chicks. That's what they do. Mom is already immune, being an adult who has been living on that soil her whole life. Therefore, if the chick pecks in mom's poop, they've pretty much got an inoculation against it to a certain degree. Another thing is they are usually on the dirt with mom earlier than if they were in a brooder, because when chicks get cold out there on the ground, they chirp and chirp, and mom lowers herself down, they get under her wings and they warm up. So she's like a walking brooder for those babies. And so they're out there earlier and in cooler weather than you would imagine they should be in. So anyway, the best preventative for cocci, I found, is to take a pan if you're brooding chicks without mama, or even with mama. Let's say it's too cold to go out and mama has to stay in the barn for a while. you put some dirt in a pan. Just go out there and get some garden dirt or wherever your chickens normally walk, dirt, gravel, whatever. Put it in a pan, shallow pan they can get into, and let them go dig in it. That starts their natural immunity much earlier in small doses, and it kind of grows immunity naturally. That doesn't mean it's 100% guaranteed they're not going to get coccidiosis at some point. Usually that happens between 4 and 8 weeks, and after that they're pretty much getting immune, and by the time they're about 12 weeks old, they're basically immune to whatever's in their soil. So people talk about getting medicated starter. Well, medicated starter, the medication in starter is amprolium. It is a thiamine blocker. It blocks I think it's B3. What number is that? B3? It blocks the thiamine, and that's what oocysts feed off of. That's why amprolium is put in some medicated chick starters. Some chick starters have that plus bacitracin. I avoid those. I would avoid. It's an antibiotic. You don't need an antibiotic for a protozoan. So I would say medicated feed, in my experience, and I have vast experience because at the beginning, years ago, I always fed medicated feed. They still got cocci. Because most of the time I brooded my own chicks. Most of my early hens were not the broody type. And so when I wanted chicks, I put them in an incubator. I brooded them. Put them on the ground, boom. 4 weeks old, everybody's got cocci. We live in Georgia. Very soupy in the warm weather. That has an effect on whether they are prone to cocci. If you live in Arizona, you may never see this. So, I avoid medicated chick starter for that reason. It doesn't really guarantee anything. It adds something to their feed they don't need. And you just watch for the symptoms. And you treat as needed with something called Corid. It comes in a powder form, which is more concentrated, or comes in a liquid form, which is less concentrated. You know what Corid is? Concentrated amprolium. Treat that for 5 days in their water, boom, they're fine. I would not advise Solmet. It's a sulfa drug, and it's a drug. It's not really a thiamine blocker. So it's it treats it a little differently, and I don't prefer that. It's also harder on their intestines than amprolium. So they already have cocci and their intestines are ravaged, and then you give them Solmet. On top of that, you need to give them probiotics after that to get their gut bacteria back up, their good gut bacteria. But the deal is, you can't have chicks vaccinated for coccidiosis before you buy them. You can order them vaccinated for cocci. When you do that, you cannot feed medicated feed because it cancels out the vaccination. And you might have guessed that I do neither. I don't have my chicks vaccinated for coccidiosis, and I don't use medicated feed. Now, if the co-op is out of regular feed, I'll get their medicated whatever. If I want a 25-pound bag and they have only a 50, the 25s don't ever come non-medicated in this brand that I use, or at least they don't get them in. So, you know, it's not going to kill anybody. Even the hens could eat that. There's no egg withdrawal for that. They don't need it, but it's not going to hurt them. So it's actually one of the most treatable ailments. It is not a carrier illness. They don't stay carriers. It is spread through, the poop, and kids go in the poop of other chicks who've got cocci. So if one has it, you have to treat everybody. So that's the deal with cocci. It's like the most treatable ailment. It's not something to stress about. It's not a carrier disease. It's just a condition that's common, especially in wet conditions or in chicks that have never seen soil, and boom, you put them on soil and there they've got it. So there's the thing about coccidiosis, cocci vaccination. There's the first one. The second one is much more sinister. Merricks Disease, also called range paralysis. If you want your chickens vaccinated against Merricks, most hatcheries will do that for a small fee. You can't bet on the chicks you buy at the feed store having it, having been vaccinated for it, although I've found that some are now doing that. As a matter of course, they have to pay a fee extra for each chick to be vaccinated for that. So anyway, and let me say that the Merricks vaccination that you get from the hatchery is not the same as the commercially available that you can buy at a feed store or from a vet supply place. It is not the same. I get that per a University of Kentucky veterinarian. He said it is not the same. The ones that are commercially available are pretty much, useless. They have to, for it to really be the right vaccine, it has to be kept at a negative temperature. I forgot negative what, but it's really like negative 70 degrees, really, really cold. And you can't do that at home. So there's that situation with the Merricks vaccination. Here's the other catch with Merricks vaccinations. They don't prevent Merricks. Do you know what they do? They prevent the symptoms, the tumors and the paralysis. Your chickens can still get Merricks disease if they're vaccinated. They just won't get the debilitating symptoms, but they can still be carriers. That's the problem. There is a dispute as to whether vaccinated for Merricks birds can shed the virus. That means they can spread it in their poop or in their dander. I've read some information that seems to imply that they can. So, Merricks, there's still a little disagreement on there depending on what you read. That's the thing. Once it's in the soil, it's in there for a long time. The carriers of it are not obvious at the beginning. Unless they show symptoms, they're just not obvious. That's another reason not to purchase chickens from random people, flea markets, or auctions. They may be unloading their problems onto you. People are not always the doing to others type. Do I have to really tell you that? Merricks disease is caused by a herpes virus. And there is a disease that looks like Merricks. Merricks is usually the disease of younger chickens. Lymphoid leukosis is, if it looks similar, it would be in an older bird generally. It's not treatable. Once you have the signs of Merricks, it is not treatable. There's no such thing as a treatment for that. Like herpes viruses, once they're infected, it's there forever. And once they're infected, they'll be infected for life. Not all infected birds will become sick. Not all of them will show symptoms. And it says, I was reading some, it said, the percentage of clinically sick birds in a flock depends on the strain of the virus. Some strains are more virulent than others, and the breed of the bird. Leghorns and light egg type breeds tend to be more vulnerable than meat type birds. Silkies in particular are highly susceptible to Merricks disease. I have a friend who, she has had mostly Silkies, and bless her heart, she bought birds from someone, and they brought Merricks into her flock, and she closed her flock, meaning no birds ever go out, and it's in there, sadly. There was another bird that is not, Egyptian Phaeomes, I think is what they are. Egyptian Phaeomes are supposedly very resistant to Merricks. They're a very lightweight, flighty kind of bird. I think it's Egyptian Phaeomes. I'm trying to remember. It's one of those very lightweight birds. They're highly, I think it's Egyptian Phaeomes. I'd have to look that up. I should have looked that up before I did this. But that's the only one I've ever heard that's actually resistant to Merricks disease. But you need to do your own research on this disease. It's one of the most devastating for a backyard flock, and there's so much information on this disease that I can't get into here, or this would be 2 hours. This is going to be long enough anyway. But buying from unknown people can bring it in, sadly. Most feed stores are requesting chicks be vaxxed for Merricks from the hatchery. I prefer not to buy those. But the whole world is hooked on what the Bible calls sorceries, the word being pharmakia, drugs, pharmaceuticals, medical intervention. Anyway, so that's the thing about Merricks. Something you never want in your flock. Now, there's Newcastle disease and infectious bronchitis. Those are basically, there's two different diseases really, I guess. And there's a lot of confusion in the commercial broiler industry about the vaccination for those things. They're called ND, Newcastle disease, and IB, infectious bronchitis. The questions, I have to read this to you. Questions arise over the route of vaccination, age of vaccination, doses of vaccine to administer per bird, mixing of Newcastle and bronchitis vaccines or other vaccines, vaccine reactions, use of live vaccines, blah, 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 blah. But see, the thing is, it's mainly a commercial operation that would use these kind of vaccinations. But it said in most cases, the vaccine virus is simply a modified or weakened field virus, so it's a live virus, basically. Those two diseases are highly, highly contagious. Highly contagious. Avian infectious bronchitis is an acute and highly contagious respiratory disease of chickens. It's caused by the virus, which is a coronavirus. YouTube censors. I'm not talking about the world situation. I'm talking about chickens. And avian and infectious bronchitis is a coronavirus. Sorry. I'm not talking about what you think I'm talking about, so leave my video alone. It's characterized by respiratory signs, including gasping, coughing, sneezing, tracheal rales, it's like, you know, strange noises, basically, I think is what that is, and nasal discharge. In young chickens, severe respiratory distress may occur, in layers, respiratory distress, nephritis, which is a kidney thing, and decrease in egg production, loss of internal and external egg quality are reported. Biosecurity, people. Biosecurity, again. There is a vaccination for infectious bursal disease. It's a viral infection, a viral disease of the bursa, which is, it's a epithelial and lymphoid organ that's only found in birds. You know, they give you, the vaccines usually give 14 to 21 days old in water or something. I don't know why you would vaccinate for that. You need to look up infectious bursal, B-U-R-S-A-L, bursal disease, if you want to find more about it. Okay, here's another thing that was interesting. This next disease has something interesting. Encephalomyelitis. That vaccine is given in the wing web, which is when the wing goes up, it's that little piece of skin right there that connects the wing to the body in the wing web. At 10 to 12 weeks old. It's an enterotropic virus, and infectious by the oral route. So I guess they eat something or whatever, I forget, or, you know, through here. The virus replicates in the intestine and is excreted in the feces. So feces, they eat that, peck it in poopy soil, and, you know, they get that. It's from infected birds. Okay, infected litter spreads the virus either direct bird-to-bird contact, which is called horizontal, or via fomites, which are going to be contaminated equipment, vehicles, people's feet, shoes. Now here's something, I had a little bit of sort of secondhand experience with this disease. A few years ago on BYC, some chicks from a hatchery, some people started complaining about chicks started getting tremors at a couple weeks old. And it was getting to be a rampant thing among people getting chicks that spring. Turns out it came from chicks from a certain hatchery. They were infected with encephalomyelitis. And so, you know, hatcheries are not 100% guaranteed safe. They're generally fairly safe, but there's not 100% guarantee even from a hatchery. And they're NPIP certified. That doesn't mean that they have a clean bill of health. Because NPIP, you'll have to look at my video on NPIP, and, you know, the NPIP program, I have a video about that. Anyway, encephalomyelitis can have, it is basically horizontal bird-to-bird transmission, but it can also be vertically transmitted. That means from mama to egg, to chick. And it says when susceptible parent stock flocks get infected after sexual maturity, they'll infect part of their progeny. During the period of being highly infectious, of about 2-week period, they can infect their progeny. And so this again is sort of a commercial type vaccination. Okay, fowl pox. Now some of you may have eventually encountered fowl pox. Fowl pox vaccine is usually given in the wing web, again that piece of skin that connects the wing to the body. Thin piece there, at 10 to 12 weeks old. Now, fowl pox is carried by mosquitoes. There's two types. There's dry pox and wet pox. It causes lesions. Dry pox causes lesions to the legs, body, and head in places that don't have feathers. Like you'll have little yellow blisters break out all over the bird's face and wattles, and then they'll turn into dry, crusty, warty-like lesions. It has risk with it, and they'll continue to grow. What you can do to treat that is you can take just plain old iodine and dab the spots with that if you want to. It dries them up quicker so they don't spread and get worse. But close to the eye can cause some problems. It's not a carrier disease, and thankfully once they've had it, they're immune to it after that. So, but the virus that causes wet fowl pox, wet pox, is a little different than the ones that cause, it's different than the one that causes chicken pox in humans, but the symptoms are kind of similar. Wet pox is a little bit trickier. The symptoms appear inside the bird's mouth and throat instead of on the skin. It's a lot harder to deal with. It causes problems in the throat and the respiratory tract. It's like white nodules in the mouth and the throat. It can actually like grow out the mouth. I've seen some horrible cases of it. You know, and as it can look like a cheesy mass growing out of her mouth, at the corner of her mouth or something. It's bad looking, and it can actually the danger can come from how it grows. It can stop them from eating and drinking, and then from breathing. If it's really bad in the respiratory tract, they won't be able to breathe. So there are cases of them having wet and dry at the same time. God help them, poor birds, right? One thing is to control mosquitoes around your place as much as possible. Watch for signs of this. Don't mistake simple peck marks on their head and wattles, you know, from other birds as fowl pox. It can have, you know, weight loss, eyes can swell, you got the wart-like lesions, and then you can have that yellow canker-like lesion in the mouth, and they'll stop drinking. So you can get vaccinated, have them vaccinated for fowl pox, but one good thing is if it's dry pox, they get it, they're 2 to 4 weeks, they're over it, and they'll never get it again. Okay, here comes the big baddie. Infectious laryngotracheitis. I hope I'm pronouncing that. Laryngo or laryngo tracheitis, ILT. It's also called avian diphtheria. It is highly contagious. This is one of those reportable to the state diseases. Bad, bad, bad stuff. You don't want to keep a bird with that. If you think a bird's got that, you've got to execute them and burn the body. But it causes, it's a highly contagious upper respiratory tract disease. And it can occasionally affect pheasants and peafowl. It's caused by the virus known as gallid herpes virus 1, another herpes virus, people. It replicates in the conjunctiva and the tracheal mucosa during the first week of infection. And this, in the severe form, it causes severe respiratory distress. They'll shake their head, they'll fling mucus and even blood. It's nasty. It's nasty. In mild forms, they might have sinusitis and conjunctivitis, so, you know, goopy eyes, that kind of thing. They are always carriers if they survive. You have to report it. You never use a vaccination for this, ever, unless you have already had it in the flock and you're keeping your birds. You never do. You never vaccinate for this. The vaccination is a live virus. It makes them carriers. This can get into your flock by introducing new chickens who have received the vaccine, had it and recovered, are actively infected. Vaccinated and recovered birds usually only shed the virus in their poop when they are under times of stress. Well, stress is, you know, if there's a predator around, if it's extreme weather, they get frightened of a thunderstorm. I mean, or you know, you change up your groups in the barn and they're fighting. Stress, any stress, and they can start shedding the virus if they've recovered from ILT or they've been vaccinated for it. They spread it by respiratory secretions, sneezing, coughing, that kind of thing, and you can get through contaminated people, equipment, clothes, hands, bedding litter, improperly burying carcasses birds that have had it that makes them accessible to wild animals or domestic dogs or cats. You must incinerate those carcasses. In fact, that's a good practice. If you ever have a bird you think is sick with some kind of respiratory, it's always a good idea to burn the carcass. Don't bury it. Burn it. And chickens who receive the ILT vaccine can infect non-infected birds. We said that. And unscrupulous sellers, like I've mentioned before, can spread that by selling birds who have been infected or vaccinated. I talked about an NPIP breeder bought a breeding rooster from another NPIP breeder. There was no mention of anything to do with this disease. She got the rooster. He looked healthy enough. She quarantined him for 3 months. She was very cautious. She put him with her flock. The entire flock began getting sick in that building. She got her NPIP tester from the state to come out to see what was going on. ILT. You know what they did? If you've heard me say this before, what they did is they said we have to euthanize your flocks. They came out with a portable gas chamber. They euthanized every bird in there, every chick. They took every egg. And even birds who were on the other side of the property that hadn't been exposed to this bird or this group, they said we have to kill them all. And she described taking these poor little young hens, these little pullets, beautiful pullets that she'd raised, to a gas chamber. And then they had the nerve to say she had to clean up the bodies. And then it said, you can't have chickens on your property for X number of years. And she said, go get screwed. Don't tell me what to do anymore. Get off my property. So, another one of those don't have a lot of do unto others people sometimes in this world. And they do unto you what they don't want done to them. Okay, now one of the most common backyard flock diseases. Get some water. In backyard flocks. And it's because people are not cautious. Mycoplasma galliseptum, and it's also called Mycoplasmosis, and its related disease, Mycoplasma synoviae. They're two of the most common diseases. Mycoplasma galliseptum, also called MG, they're called MG and MS, but MG, it's a bacterial infection that can cause a chronic respiratory infection. It's part of a group of diseases called chronic respiratory disease, CRD. The vaccine for this is usually given between 10 and 14 weeks of age, either in the eyeball with eye drops or by spray. I think there are some injectable vaccines as well. It's an organism, the bacteria-like organism causes it mainly in chickens and turkeys, but it can also affect game birds, pigeons, ducks, geese, peafowl, and wild birds. That's why you don't want wild birds setting up shop in your barn. I have actually seen wild birds with what looked like they might have a disease. Not in this place, but in the subdivision where I used to live, and back in the suburbs. I once had a bird land outside my window, and one eye was closed, and it could have been an injury, but it could also have been MG. Although generally, the way people end up with that in their flock is they bought chickens from somebody, usually a flea market or an auction or some random person they don't know. Didn't ask any questions. Of course, people can lie, but you can ask a question in such a way that you can get them to tell you stuff that they probably shouldn't be telling you if they wanted to sell a bird. Usually people get it into their flock by buying birds from somebody else. And do you know most hatcheries are not certified MG free? That's the truth. That's an extra expense. In the NPIP program, they don't normally test for that. You have to pay extra, and you have to do it every quarter, not once a year. So I have my severe issues with the NPIP program. Okay. Symptoms of MG. Difficulty breathing, sneezing, coughing, rails. I guess strange, that kind of sound, I think it's what rails are. I have to look that up again. Nasal discharge, foamy eyes. No. bird can get a foamy eye, or not a foamy eye, but those little bubbles in the eye from sucking something up the wrong way. They can also get it from getting something in their eye. I once had a chicken, I think it was Drusilla, she was stung by a bee. She stuck her face in a bush and she got stung and her eye swelled up. But you know, you gotta know your chickens, and you gotta know what the situation is and where they've been. But MG can be more severe when infected chickens have other diseases, you know, or if there are high levels of dust and ammonia in your coop. So I say keep it clean, keep it dry. Birds that recover from MG are carriers of MG. They may show no signs of it until they're stressed. People are often sold birds who are carriers of MG, unfortunately. Now, the organism itself is really fragile. It can't live that long without a host. It can only survive a few days without a host. But infected poultry, unfortunately, can transmit it to their offspring through eggs. Now, first, years ago, I had information that they couldn't. Now they're saying that they can. They definitely can transfer Mycoplasmosis synovii. It's something in the legs. You'll need to look this up. Synovii is SYNOVIAE or something like that. I can't do it all for you. You got to look up some of this. But you can get your birds vaccinated for MG. Okay, poultry auctions, swap meet shows, and other events of poultry of uncertain disease status have been associated with MG outbreaks. Egg flats, cages, coops, tools, and equipment that are contaminated with droppings and respiratory secretions from MG-infected birds can spread it to clean flocks. People that work with other live birds can bring it back to their poultry operations on their clothing and their shoes and equipment. People can harbor MG inside their noses for days. Did you know that? I didn't even know that. Birds infected with MG stay carriers throughout their lives. You can give antibiotics to reduce the clinical symptoms, but it does not cure it. It is incurable, people. I can't count the number of times somebody says, well, this chicken's got goopy eyes, and what antibiotic do I give it? I said, don't give it an antibiotic. You don't know what you're treating. If it's a virus, it's not going to do anything. And if it's bacterial, all you're going to do is mask symptoms. You're not going to cure this. So unless you can determine that what your chicken has is something non-transmittable, such as a sinus infection. I had one hen who I felt her nares were malformed inside, and she was constant for getting a sinus thing. After she got a fungal infection, which you don't give antibiotics for, one strange summer, several got a fungal infection, which is it's not transmittable. It's just something from breathing in spores that were released, and it sets up in the lungs and makes them breathe like a percolator. Unless you can determine for sure by circumstance and observation that that's what they have, you know, that's the symptoms of MG. And you can't, it's really hard to determine that unless you're very in touch with what's going on. You know the symptoms of this stuff. You know what happened to them. Or they had pneumonia. Pneumonia, not contagious. I had a friend who had birds, she had them in cages on the lawn. She went off somewhere. She got back, and there was a rainstorm. Had soaked them to the bone. They both got pneumonia. Her veterinarian did come and treat them. He said they have pneumonia. He said they're not contagious. They have pneumonia. That's what happened. That you can treat with antibiotics. Sure. I've had 2 birds, I think, get pneumonia. No, 3 over the last 15 years. So it's not that usual. But anyway, so you can have a vaccination for MG. I don't know where you're going to get it. Most veterinarians don't treat chickens. They don't have those things on hand. I'm not sure that's sold in stores right now. They're doing everything they can not to make things available to chicken owners to be able to treat their own birds. And so I've given you a crash course on some very scary diseases and some not so scary. Coccidiosis, meh. You know, dry pox looks nasty, but it's not as scary because, you know, they get it, they recover. Okay, just try not to keep mosquitoes rampant around your house. So anyway, I can tell you're thoroughly frightened now. I can tell you the only thing on this list that I've encountered in 15 plus years of raising chickens is coccidiosis, having hatched hundreds of chicks here. I will tell you that not one bird on this property has ever been vaccinated for anything, ever. Never had anything, ever. I practice strict biosecurity. Almost every bird is hatched right here. Those that didn't come from hatchery shipment direct to a feed store, and I don't let them sit there a long time. I mean, if the feed store's getting a shipment, I would always go that day and get those birds the day they got there, so I could help relieve their shipping stress, and they wouldn't be exposed for very long to people coming and handling them, that kind of thing. And always spray your shoes after you come back from the feed store, if you can remember. Spray it with Lysol, whatever. That's adequate. But there's only 2 birds here that ever came from other people. 2 in over 15 years. The first was my very first rooster. I bought him from my first flock. He didn't have anything contagious, but he did have Favus, which is a fungal infection of the comb and wattles, and it's like a white film, and you treat it with antifungals, like you would any yeast infection on your foot or whatever. Poor boy. He had lice, he had Favus, he was a mess. In 1 month he was a different bird, I can tell you that. He'd only been fed corn, shame on them. But and his plumage showed it too. But that was the first bird I got that wasn't originally here. And he was in quarantine for 5 weeks. And I was consulting a PhD in poultry science the whole time about anything I saw in this bird. He was fine. And the only other one, I still have her. She's my 13-year-old Easter egg, June. She was actually a gift from a friend who has, that I'd already given. She'd given me hatching eggs. I'd given her hatching eggs. And actually, my Amanda that just died this last year, she was hatched from eggs from this lady's flock. And she was getting supposed to be a guy who was working on a project for salmon americanas. I'm not sure they ever finished those. And so, of course, she's an Easter egger. She's not a true Americana. And so she was a gift, and this woman had never had any disease in her flock. So she gave June to me, and June was in quarantine for a month anyway, separate from my flocks, and of course Miss June is still here at 13 years old. And I've always avoided Tractor Supply because, chicks, because here they were always lax about letting ignorant folks and kids get back there and handle chicks. I don't think they do that as much anymore because I complained about it. But, you know, who knows what was on their hands? Who knows if they had a sick flock and they came and handled these chicks and put them back? And somebody bought this chick? That's a nightmare. I wouldn't buy from Tractor Supply. So, in any case, that is the thing about vaccinations. I've never vaccinated a bird for anything. Coccidiosis is easy to handle. But those are the diseases, and most of these are, vaccination. There was a drug, I can't remember what it was called. Somebody was saying you give this to them regularly and it prevents MG. I'm thinking, why would you dose somebody with a medication constantly just to prevent something, when good biosecurity and being careful not to buy from other nefarious, shady people, or ignorant people. Sometimes it's just ignorance. They don't know this. Chickens don't get colds. They get diseases like a coronavirus and a herpes virus that stay with the bird forever. You know, why would you bother with giving an expensive drug to them constantly? That made no sense to me, and I don't condone that. So that's the long and short of vaccinations. And I've never seen any of these diseases. The only one I've ever encountered is coccidiosis. So to me, it's more of a condition than a disease, if you know what I'm saying about the difference of that. I've never even seen fowl pox, and we've had plenty of mosquitoes. I try to keep all the standing water down, but you know, I've got 5 acres. It's a little hard to keep it all down. You know, if they get fowl pox, I'll treat it. I'll put iodine on the lesions, let them dry up faster so they don't spread so easily, and there you go. So, hope this helps. I'm sorry it was such a long video, but you know, necessity, the subject kind of, it had to be. So, thanks for watching. I'm going to do another video. It may really be released today even, so we'll see. Bye, y'all.